Thank you for tuning in to the Practical Preservation Podcast. Please take a moment to visit our website, practicalpreservationservices.com, for additional information and tips to help you restore your historical home. If you've not done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, and also like us on Facebook. Welcome to the Practical Preservation Podcast, hosted by Danielle and Jonathan Kepperling. Kepperling Preservation Services is a family-owned business based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, dedicated to the preservation of our built architectural history for today's use as well as future generations. Our weekly podcast provides you with expert advice specific to the unique needs of renovating a historic home, educating by sharing our From the Trenches preservation knowledge and our guests' expertise, balancing modern needs while maintaining the historical significance, character, and beauty of your period home.
So today on the Practical Preservation Podcast, I have Lauren Kope with me, and she is the program coordinator for the University of Delaware's Botanic Garden. So Lauren, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I'm so happy to be here. I'm flattered and touched.
I'm glad.
Dig into our discussion.
Yes. So tell me about your background.
Sure. So for the past 10 or 12 years or so that I've been working professionally in the career, I've worked with plants in some capacity throughout that time, and I feel really lucky to say that. The field certainly does not lack in depth. I received my undergraduate degree in agricultural science from Virginia Tech, and I worked in agriculture for 3 or so years before I kind of took a bit of a turn, 45-degree angle, to a job that I really loved as an estate gardener in Charlottesville, Virginia. And it was a job that I just really didn't know existed until I saw the posting for it. And it just turned out to be such an incredible job. And it was really formative for my career path and really shaped me a lot in that way. So I was managing the aesthetic parts of the garden and formal gardens there. I was doing the floral design for the home. And it was just a wonderful experience. I really loved working with plants in an aesthetic environment, and really incredibly fulfilling on a personal level. I loved my coworkers and the work that I was doing, but I really wanted to be able to share that. And I would attend conferences up in the Philadelphia region a couple times a year, typically. And every time I would visit, I saw amazing gardens. I spoke with great gardeners. And when I would attend the conferences, everyone in the room was just so engaged and the material was fascinating. And I knew that I really wanted to be in the Philadelphia region because there's just so many gardens. There's about 40 public gardens within the region of Greater Philadelphia, all the way up from New Jersey to the Wilmington, Delaware region.
Right.
So there's just a beautiful constellation of horticulture in this area that really goes back to early United States. And so, yeah, I just really wanted to be closer to that network. And so I applied for the professional horticulture program at Longwood Gardens. And I feel made a great network through that, which was wonderful and really helped solidify some gaps that I had in my own knowledge, and then also, just kind of fill in what I was missing. And yeah, as I mentioned, got connected with a lot of great people through that program as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they think of like gardens and formal gardens in this area, definitely think of the DuPont to the Longwood and the Winter Tour.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think too, there's just a decent amount of gardens in general in this region and beyond that were started as private gardens and then were endowed into public landscapes. And certainly the DuPonts are part of that.
Yes. Well, that's very interesting. So did you work, like, what did you do within agriculture before you transitioned into the estate gardener?
I worked with my sister. We had a farm on my parents' property, actually, and we did a bit of everything. We had a CSA. We sold at farmers markets, to restaurants. And that was a great community to be a part of as well. I don't know. I think that's what I love so much about horticulture and agriculture in general, is the community that it builds. And it's not, I would say all the fields that I've been in with plants are very collaborative. It's not very cagey. I feel like everybody is very open to learning from each other. And yeah, so agriculture, I found that to be, at least on a local level, really community driven as well.
Yeah. And that makes sense, especially like the CSAs and farmers markets. Those are great, great places to connect with people. When I was first married, before I started working in my parents' company and started on this path, I worked at a farmer's market every Tuesday for a bakery.
Oh, nice.
For like, 12 hours a day. And I would have like a 2-hour lunch in the middle of the day where I would do my shopping at the market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love being able to like trade with everyone at the end.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely a different experience and a different pace than like just going to the grocery store.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So what pulled you kind of into the understanding the history of horticulture and kind of that preservation of that history?
Yeah. So I came to preservation and historic gardens by way of a garden called Wyck House and Garden. And that is, for people that aren't familiar with the Philadelphia area, it's northwest of the city, and it looks pretty far out of the city proper. But when you're there, it still feels very much a part of the city. And it's a home that was held in singular family ownership for 9 generations. And yes, from 1690, when it began as a flax farm in the Germantown neighborhood, to its eventual transition into a nonprofit in the 1970s. And Wyck, for better or worse, is such a secret, I feel like, of the Philadelphia region. If you are interested in history of really any type, I would say visit Wyck. It is so fascinating. And I think what makes it such a rare and compelling site is the fact that it's a very cohesive collection. So we have an object collection of around 10,000 objects. And then when you add historic correspondence to that, the number jumps up to around 100,000. And a lot of that is housed in the American Philosophical Society. And added to that, a lot of the object collection is housed inside of the home, which was never raised at any point. It's just kind of an amalgamation built on top of that original structure, which was in its current iteration, 1824. William Strickland designed it. It was this, to my knowledge, his only domestic interior. So the home and collection together would be pretty fascinating, because the descendants were, they were Quaker and had a very, I would say, like scientific eye towards the natural world. And they were very curious souls. And they, I guess what we would say, they were like the modern day hoarders. So they were keeping, we had a whole room in the attic just full of chairs, just like 30, 50 chairs.
Oh my goodness.
At one point when we were going through a part of the collection, there was a box that was labeled "pens that don't work." So you just,
my goodness, those you can throw away.
yeah, we can throw those away. So because of that, though, there's this unique snapshot into daily life that's so detailed in a way and really fascinating. And so, for example, for a horticulturist such as myself, we have the entire collection of this horticultural publication called Meehan's Monthly. And Thomas Meehan was a local nurseryman in the Germantown area. He was responsible for helping save Bartram's garden after it had kind of started to fall into disrepair. And he was publishing this horticultural subscription magazine that I get so many magazines in the mail and just chuck them after I've read them and or give them to a friend. But we have the entire collection of them, and they're fabulous to go through with these gorgeous lithographs and poetry. And we have also in the collection like notes that were passed between the children in class, and just little doodles and notes. It's so interesting. And so on top of the object, this really nuanced object collection that extends outdoors into the landscape, with several historic outbuildings, and then the kind of gem of the landscape being our historic rose garden, which dates back to the early 1800s, 1820s. And that predates most rose gardens in this country by about a century. Most rose gardens that we think of, the typical type, would be late 1800s, early 1900s.
The Victorian, yeah.
Right. And the garden certainly has evolved, and we can't exist in a stasis, with gardens. So there's certainly been additions made, but I think the most important part of Wyck being that there were not very many subtractions that were made. So we get a glimpse of a lot of these historic varieties that had really fallen out of favor and out of trade in other gardens in the region and beyond.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me when a property stays in a family for so long, because usually that's what happens. They keep adding to rather than subtracting. They don't feel like they need to make it their own as much.
Yeah. And the one of the generation, so the drafter of the Rose Garden, Jane Bounhanes, her and her husband, their last child was orphaned at a very young age. They had both passed away by the time their daughter, who would inherit the house, was only 10 years old. So she had a very sentimental view over her parents' garden and the home in general. And so she was really responsible for carrying that collection into the early 20th century. And yeah, I think that's just kind of interesting to think of her mindset. And there were a few different reasons, I imagine, for why she was so fastidious in keeping that collection. But yeah, one of that I would definitely think was sentimentalism.
Yeah, I agree. There was something else I was thinking about. That magazine collection is pretty amazing to me too, because those things are things that we even a generation ago would hold on to, because you don't know when you need to go back to research or look for something, and now everything's so easy to pull up online.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's a big shift within our culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a really good point.
Yeah. So tell me about the work that you do now, the work you've done.
Yeah, as it relates to preservation and historic gardens, Wyck was kind of the one that I have the most, that touches on that the most. In my current role, I am I'm doing more of the programming aspect of things, so planning events and such for the public garden there that's attached to the university. So it's a different focus entirely. I suppose at its core, Wyck, as well as the Botanic Gardens at University of Delaware, both are primarily focused on educating, but in very different ways. And I think that's an interesting point between gardens in general, just noting their purpose and their mission driven. So being more collections-based garden, more display garden, like we think of Longwood Gardens, where they're doing a lot of bedding and a lot of change out of their plant material. Wyck being more of a historic garden, where they're piecing together a story and a lineage there. A garden like Mount Cuba, for example, also in our region, that's focusing more on native plants. So I think that's kind of what I love so much about the region too, is that it's the rising tide floats all boats. Like, no one is really just visiting one garden every single time. We're coming to gardens for different reasons and to explore different things in different settings and landscapes. So yeah, my shift to the Botanic Garden at Delaware is kind of just it's certainly different from Wyck, but I'm enjoying more of the collections aspect of it, and a new community to be a part of.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
And I would think that by planning events and having people, come in to see, that's also a way to educate about the different ways that gardens can be utilized.
Absolutely. And I'm excited to have the side perk of getting to, whenever we have a speaker come in, I get to sit in on those.
Yes, that is a big perk.
Yes, so I have been enjoying that for sure.
So are there any, I guess you've talked kind of about the different positions that you've had within in the gardens and in horticulture. Are there any like special projects or anything that's really special to you?
I think a lot of what excites me about horticulture is kind of, as you can probably tell, is just the region and the breadth of horticulture that we have in this area, and sharing that with people. Getting to be able to, so we have a group in the area, America's Garden Capital, that there's a small passport that they have printed that's really awesome. It has all the gardens in our region, and formulated much like a passport would be, and you can go to each of the gardens and get them stamped. And so I just love to make people aware of that and what's in their backyards. And
that's a great way to get people to visit. I love that idea.
Definitely. Yeah, it's adorable. It's really well made. Yeah, and I love horticulture has brought me in touch with so many amazing people as well. And so that's kind of what I was trying to step towards with my current role, is the opportunity to, because I would be planning events and programming, have the opportunity to pull more people in, and for my own curiosity and hope, and the communities as well, trying to pull together people that have a background and connect more people together with horticulture. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I love about planning educational programming too, is being able to expose different people to different ideas. That's one of the reasons I really enjoy doing the podcast too, is I get to talk to a lot of different people that I wouldn't usually get to interact with.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I totally understand that excitement.
Definitely. So, and I think that's so important to have that cross collaboration and cross pollination between fields. And working at a garden like Wyck too, I came to that garden by way of horticulture, not by way of history and preservation. And so I learned a lot from my coworkers who were managing the object collection. And it was fascinating to be able to kind of discuss the two and the parallels and differences of managing each. I found that to be a really fun aspect of the job as well. Yeah,
I could see that, because, and that's, I think the more that I talk to people within the preservation field, they usually come into it accidentally. Not a lot of people, graduate from high school thinking they want to preserve things.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear that, but a lot of, there is a lot of on the job learning, that is valuable, and it's very important to pass that information along too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. So one thing that I kind of struggled with a lot while giving tours is this need for, like, I thought of this as you were mentioning, that people kind of fell into it in one way or another. And I had a lot of that imposter syndrome of being like, oh, am I qualified to tell this story? Because I
feel that all the time too.
Yeah. Well, that makes me feel better. I think a lot about transparency in that storytelling and how easy it is to, there were a couple times when it would have been so easy to just say, this is the history of this rose, just because there's several, we have several supporting factors for that. But we don't know for sure. And so I always felt that need to just be transparent about that and not, and I wonder if other people feel that too, or if I just,
I know. Yeah. When I talk to people, I try to, give the best answer that I can, but if I'm not 100% sure and I'm taking an educated guess, I'll tell them.
Yeah.
And usually my educated guesses are pretty good, but you know, I don't want people to like, and I think about that with just tour guides in general, because I feel like they could just make up stuff and people believe it.
Oh yeah. Oh, totally. Absolutely.
So I do try to be pretty transparent with, this is what I think, but this is what we know about this. And I think people understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm more about probably being authentic than just pretending that I'm the expert.
Likewise, yeah.
But my education is in business. And when I started working with my parents 22 years ago, I started pretty much as a glorified secretary, went back to school because I had gone to culinary arts school right out of high school, but we were preserving buildings. So I started learning, going to conferences, but my degrees are not in preservation. And so like somebody sent me like an ad for like the county was looking for somebody to do 106 reviews, which is like a federal requirement for certain projects with federal funding. And I said, I could do that. I meet the requirements for education or meet the requirements for like experience and everything. I said, except I don't have the education they want. And, so I am not qualified. And they couldn't believe it. They were like, oh, I can't believe they wouldn't let you do this.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. At some point, work experience has to outweigh, right?
Right. I would think so. They only wanted 2 years of work experience, but
oh boy, that's my favorite.
But so in those moments, I definitely feel like, oh no, maybe I don't know what I'm, but maybe they know something I don't.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I always say about horticulture, that I love that it's this appreciating skill. And you would become, and I imagine preservation is a similar way. You're becoming more valuable over time, right, instead of obsolete with the times. A lot of technology is by the time you learn it, there's something new happening. And I love that there's so much to learn from people that, even at the same experience level, but working in a different
different experience,
different, right? Yeah. And I think that counts for so much. And I felt, at least when I got my degree, I think it gave me a great basis, and it was important in a lot of factors. But at the same time, I didn't feel necessarily prepared for agriculture proper until I really got my experience with that. So in the field. So I do think it's so important to have both of those together in tandem.
Yeah, I agree with you. So do you have any tips for someone who is caring for creating a garden with native plants or in a historic garden design? Or both?
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I would say, first, having a soft touch. I think historic gardens really call for, a careful consideration before really making these drastic changes, and they're often needed. But at least I think it's true for most gardens. You really need time spent observing. It's because the garden will change so much in a given season and over a year. It's really important to just take stock of what's existing, and without the assumption that because something's there when you arrive doesn't mean it's of a certain age or legacy.
Right.
So when I started at Wyck had been acting as a nonprofit for 50 years. And so there's certainly changes that have been made and concessions that you often have to make in historic gardens, for accessibility. And to make it a public space, you have to add bathrooms and you have to add a parking area or sidewalks. So there's considerations on that point as well. And yeah, I think too, important to decide a standard. So interestingly, or something that I find interesting with living collections is deciding, is it the plant itself that's so important, or is it where it is in the garden, or its maturity and structure that it provides?
Right.
So while I was at Wyck, we replaced the boxwood parterres in the garden. And of course that has to be done because we can't have a 200-year-old plant, boxwood, low growing shrub that's 200 years old. It's going to grow up eventually and be replacing. And often too, I mean, even with historic cultivars of a lot of vegetables, these heirloom varieties we've now bred to over time have better resistance to diseases and pests.
Right.
So when you plant an heirloom plant, is it more important that we keep that storyline and those genetic material, or is it more important that we're preserving it against pests and diseases? So there's a trade-off and a balance between that.
I never thought about that, but that makes sense because you need it to be able to grow and reproduce in order to continue on. So that, yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah. One specific example was a giant magnolia tree that we had in the backyard or in the rose garden at Wyck in the backside of the house. And it was an incredibly important genetic material. It was in the first shipment of plants that arrived to the United States of that hybrid. And so it was declining. Well, it had fallen, I believe, in a storm, and then it had put up a little water sprout that was just so adorable. It was this miniature little tree, and I loved it so much. And that eventually caved and fell in a storm. And we had propagated the tree so that we could have that genetic material preserved, but the presence of the tree was gone. And so when we were able to replant the magnolia tree, I didn't really want to plant it back in its original space because it was shading out the roses and it's right near the house and an obstacle. So
it wasn't, when they thought about planting it 200 years ago, they didn't think about those things.
Right. It looked a little different in their time. So it's choices like that I find a challenge, but also exciting to think about and just an interesting point of working.
Yeah, I think that's really practical. And it allows that the genetics of that magnolia to continue on, but maybe not in the same exact area. And I think that is preservation. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And I found myself a lot thinking of the spirit of the place and thinking of what the previous owners or generations, what their overall mindset was in preserving and having the garden in general, and using that to guide decision making in the garden as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good basis to operate from.
Yeah, I think every garden takes liberties with that to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And how well that mission was really laid out before it was turned into a nonprofit or public space.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you really don't have a guide map that's that strong, and it's other gardens you do. So that can be limiting or freeing on that front. And another thing I think of often is, at what point in time are we preserving for?
Right.
We could bring the garden back to its rudimentary herb garden when it was in the 1700s, or we have it preserved now towards the 1820s design plan. And same with the home that was built in its current iteration in the 1820s. But within the bones of that is the log cabin from 100 years prior to that. So thinking about what point in time we choose to interpret to and what snapshot, I find really fascinating.
Yeah, that is, and that's often a conversation within preservation of buildings. The National Park Service calls it the period of significance. So if there was a historic property or a historic event, that's what but the other thing is, and I think this is probably similar to what you're talking about too, is, so let's just say it's a house. It's not, it's not a national park site. And, the house has gone through, 200-300 years of changes. Do you respect those changes because they're part of the history of the house, or do you take it back to, its original? And that, it's a philosophical debate. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer.
Yeah, I agree. And could also be said, one thing a similarity between that kind of object and living collection. Difference too is with invasive plants. So we had a couple plants that are in the historic collection that of invasive plants, and so trying to figure out how we reckon with those. And a lot of plants in this region that are some of our worst weeds were first introduced as ornamental plants, and so that's a consideration as well for interpreting spaces and what responsibly we can keep in the garden and what should
right, so that it doesn't spread to someplace else.
Right.
Yeah. They're yeah. And I think that's part of the move towards native plants, is to, grow things that will grow well in this climate, or, just in general in the area. And that just made me think of my parents. So my parents a few years ago moved to Arizona, and they have a house now that they did not put the grass in, but they have grass. And every time my mom talks about it, it drives me crazy, because I'm like, there's not supposed to be grass in Arizona. Like,
yeah.
You're running out of water and you're watering your grass. Like,
yeah.
It drives me crazy.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It would drive me a little crazy too. I mean, I love nicely mowed grass, but in Arizona, that's a little hard.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So, do you see any common mistakes that people make when caring for, native plants or historic gardens?
Yeah, I think more about just being responsible in what introductions we're making or changes that we're making. And also, I think a challenge, as we mentioned with the invasive species, is controlling those in a way that that makes sense. And often that can be a really heated debate, but
Right.
My feeling on it is often that's limited by labor. And so when you're trying to manage a large space has a lot of invasive species, trying to control that with manual methods, sometimes that works absolutely great, and sometimes you have to use, in my opinion, you do have to use chemicals judiciously to be able to manage that at points. And so I was very careful about decisions that I was making, especially in like near the historic areas of the garden. I really didn't use chemicals really at all in that space. But in other areas of the site, and in other gardens I've worked in, sometimes it's like to get to a certain threshold where you can maintain the garden and start to go ahead and reestablish some of those native species into that design, to get to that base benchmark level. Sometimes you have to use control methods that are chemical, and I think that's just a part of the toolbox that we have. So I think I feel like in talking with people about restoring their gardens, or kind of even reining them in to a certain extent, feeling so overwhelmed by trying to do it all by manual methods. And
Right.
I think that, I mean, I love weeding. I think it's so important to have I think there's so much we can accomplish through manual weeding and just timing things correctly in the garden so that we minimize weed control. But at the same time, I think thinking more holistically about the space and what you want to accomplish, and in the end goal, how that's going to work, is really important. And I would say, yeah, just having a balance. It's a challenge to have the balance of working and preserving a space.
Right. Because you still have to maintain it.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's a struggle with everything. Everything needs to be maintained.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
and I think.
Go ahead.
I, for better or worse, I do feel that making something beautiful incentivizes people to preserve it. And so being able to get a space so I was really proud of being able to get the garden that I worked at to a space where we weren't apologizing after it all the time to say like, oh,
Right.
sorry, this like looks really bad, or it looks like it's not being taken care of, or and not only it reflects bad on me, but also it feels like, well, why would people want to keep coming to the space if it doesn't look enjoyable? Why would they want to make a donation and see it preserved? So sometimes to garner that, you have to work towards making things more
Right.
beautiful.
Yeah, no, I think that that's really true. Like once something is cared for and restored, people really want to help keep it that way, especially if they saw what it looked like previously.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So do you see, from your vantage point, do you see any trends or challenges within preservation?
Within preservation, I think what we had pointed to earlier about just transparency and our storytelling, and I often thinking, at least on just I would find myself often thinking about just the general personality of the people that lived in the home. Like I really enjoyed seeing all of the peripheral things that seem to point to a picture of who this person is.
Right.
But I haven't ever met this person, so I don't really know. And so I always thought that was something that's a major challenge to me, and kind of dissecting some of trying to piece apart the really depth of personhood and trying to put together a picture of someone's life and work in a way that's immaculate, I think is kind of impossible. And so
right.
kind of reckoning
you get glimpses.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that people are very similar. Even 200 years ago, the things that motivate and make people do things are the same things that do now. I have a book. It's like from the classifieds of the Lancaster newspaper, late 1700s, early 1800s. And it was like their Facebook. You just had to go down to the newspaper office, be fired up enough to go down to the newspaper office and report whatever you wanted to about whoever you wanted to.
Oh my gosh.
It's really funny.
That sounds so good.
They just had to be a little more committed than, typing in their phone.
Yeah, totally. Oh, and I'm sure people were committed.
Oh yeah. There was one that was like, it was like runaway wives or runaway slaves, something wives, and then like missing apprentices. And there was one that was like, if this man says that his apprentice quit or ran away, he didn't. I was there when he said, get out of here.
Whoa. Oh my God. Oh, wow.
I'm just like, oh my goodness. So yeah, people are the same.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They gotta stick their, yeah.
So it just makes me giggle to think about it, because we're I think just our technology's changed.
Yeah, different platform, but still the same stuff.
Yeah. So is there anything that you want to share that I didn't think to ask you before we wrap up?
No, I really enjoyed our conversation, and I was so glad when you contacted me, just because as I mentioned, my coworkers and I would often talk about the difference between managing a living collection and an object architectural collection, and kind of the differences and challenges between each. And so I find that really, I feel really lucky and privileged to have a conversation with you about it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to come. If someone was interested in learning more, how could they contact you?
Probably through my Instagram.
Okay.
I'm sunk in the garden with under spaces between all of those words.
Okay. We'll make sure that that's on our website where the podcast is, so that if somebody's listening and didn't get a chance to write that down, they can find it there. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining me today. I enjoyed our conversation also.
Thank you, Danielle. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Oops.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Preservation Podcast. The resources discussed during this episode are on our website at practicalpreservationservices.com/podcast. If you received value from this episode and know someone else that will get value from it as well, please share it with them. Join us next week for another episode of the Practical Preservation Podcast. For more information on restoring your historic home, visit practicalpreservationservices.com.